Okay, I don't know how many of us have heard about biological membrane. I'm going to just give a quick intro to what biological membrane is all about. So you can say that the main remarkable feature of a biological membrane is in their flexibility. They are very flexible. That's their ability to change shape without losing their integrity. They change shape and they don't lose or compromise their integrity. This is because, why? Because of non-covalent interaction among the lipids in the membrane. In the bilayer, the motions allow the individual lipids to do their actions without losing their integrity. Do you understand? Because they are covalently anchored to one another. Now, let's take for instance, the fast lateral diffusion within the plane of the bilayers, that's the rate of fluorescence recovery after the photo bleach, is a measure of the rate of lateral diffusion of the lipids. Lateral diffusion can be shown experimentally by attaching fluorescent probes to the health group of the lipids and using fluorescent microscopy to follow the probes over time. That's when you talk about the flap. Now, the evidence that show that membrane are dynamic. The first one I talked about is flap method, measure of the rate of lateral diffusion of the lipids. Then we have the flip-flop motion. The flip-flop motion. Then the third one is the measure of permeability coefficients of the ions and molecule across the bilayers. When you talk of cell function of this biological membrane, you talk about the connection between the neighboring cells or the contact between the cell itself and the extracellular matrix, which is called membrane junction. Do you understand that? So now I'm going to talk about the membrane junctions we know. We have occluding junction. When you talk about the occluding junction, this occluding junction prevents the intercellular exchange of substance. Example, the tight junctions. The occluding junction prevents the intercellular exchange of substance. Remember when I talk about the flexibility of the biological membrane and the ability to change shape without losing their integrity. Now I'm telling you now why it's so. Number one is the excluding junction. It will prevent the intercellular exchange of substance. So when an action is happening in the membrane and still remain the integrity is same and not compromised, is because the occluding junction prevents exchange of another substance when a biological action is taking place. Then we have communicating junction. This communicating junction prevents, that's the communicating junction permits the intercellular exchange of substance. That's the second junction. And the third junction, we call it the anchoring junction. This is the anchor. When you say somebody is anchor, is a strength. This anchoring junction provides strength to the cells by acting like mechanical attachment. There was a place when I call tight junction, and the place I call tight junction is the occluding junction. Example of occluding junction, a tight junction. Then you might be asking to want to know what tight junction is all about. Tight junction is the region where the cell membrane of the adjacent cell fuse together firmly. It presents in the apical margin of the epithelial and endothelial cells in intestinal mucosa. Do you understand? Those epithelial margins the epithelial and endothelial cells in the intestinal margin, not only the intestinal mucosa, the wall of renal tubule, the capillary wall, and choroid plexus. That is what the anchor does during biological action in biological membranes. So you can ask, and this tight junction is like that because it is made up of a ridge that has two halves. One half of the ridge is from one cell and another half is from the other cell. So both the halves of the ridge fuse with each other very tightly and occupy the space between the two cells. Then each of the cells, each of the half of the ridge consists of the tight junction strand and not only one. And you know the protein involved in the formation of tight junction are classified into two types. When you talk of the protein, you call the tight junction membrane protein or integral protein. And tight junction membrane protein or integral protein, we have the one they call occludin. We have the one they call junctional adhesive molecules. That's, in essence, we call it JAM. Then we have the one they call claudin. That's the one of the tight junction membrane protein. Then we have the second one we call scaffold or peripheral membrane protein. Peripheral membrane protein, if I call the name, I don't know. We have the one they call symplecin and we have the one they call kinglin. That's the protein we have. Then tight junction membrane protein molecules are anchored in the strand of the ridge and attached with their counterparts of neighboring cell so that both the cells are held together. The scaffold protein attached with the tight junction membrane protein and strengthen the anchoring in the ridges. I've already mentioned it, but if you want to know what tight junction also functions as, the right junction hold the neighboring cells of the tissue firmly and do provide strength and stability to the tissue, reason why they are flexible and do not compromise their integrity. Another basic function of this is sodium pump is to maintain the main basic function of sodium pump in that membrane protein is to maintain the sodium ion and potassium ion gradient across the plasma membrane. Do you understand? Membrane potential, the nutrient uptake, the intracellular volume, the pH are all regulated by proper function of this sodium pump during the biological membrane function. Then another function of this tight junction is that it functions as selective diffusion barrier between the neighboring cells in the epithelial and the endothelial cells. And it can as well prevent the lateral movement of integral protein and lipids in cell membrane and thus act as a fence. When it's something a fence, now before you break in, you will take permission. So fencing function maintain the different composition of protein and lipid between the apical and basolateral plasma membrane domains. It also maintains the cell polarity by keeping the proteins in the apical region of the cell membrane. Thank you very much. I'll be bringing you more of this biological membrane, their functions, and what it does in the body system. Thank you very much. This is just a quick overview, basic overview of what you should think of the membrane, why it changes its shape without compromising their integrity. Thank you very much.